Yeah. So Kiran, who has been an old friend of mine for many years, and I have seen grow always from being a very important and very successful entrepreneur to an even more successful one. I mean, I would never have really been able to fully predict the heights that she could go to, but I always knew she would be where she is. And what strikes me most about someone like Kiran is the heart with which she rules her company, the desire to heal the world. It's not just the desire to build a profitable company, and her ability to combine the doing good with the running a successful business. And I think this is a trait which is very female, the desire to marry what is important and bring those value systems to work and do it successfully. You know, she's not running a charity. She's accountable to hundreds of thousands of shareholders around the world and in India, and yet she allows her heart to rule even while her head is hard at work. And it's an amazing combination, and not one, frankly, it's not something I've seen in any other guy. So Kiran, over to you.
Yeah. That's very kind of you, Naina. So let me start by saying that I call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I never expected to run a business. I started out quite by chance because I actually did something very unusual. I actually qualified as India's first female brewmaster, and I actually returned to India hoping to actually pursue a career in brewing, only to find that it was a male bastion and they would never ever open their doors to women. So with the door shut on me, I decided, okay, I will turn to entrepreneurship and at least put my knowledge to some use. And you know, I kind of consoled myself by saying, well, let me start a biotech company because, you know, brewing is the oldest biotechnology known to man. So I said, okay, let me put my fermentation skills to use, and that's how I started Biocon, really on a sort of a fallback option. And then, of course, once I set my mind to it, I was determined to prove the people who rejected me as a brewer, the people who rejected me as someone who could manage very professionally, wrong, because they really felt that women were not capable of being good professional managers. So with that kind of a challenge, I set about starting my own business in 1978. And I can tell you that the early days were very, very challenging. I had huge credibility challenges as a woman. I had huge credibility challenges as a young woman because I was only 25 years old when I started Biocon. And I had huge credibility challenges because I was trying to start and pioneer a sector called biotechnology which nobody understood. So I was considered high risk as a woman, as an inexperienced young entrepreneur because there was no concept of startup companies in the late 70s, and there was no concept of venture funding either, so it was all about debt capital. And then the banks wouldn't lend to me because they felt I was high risk, both because I did not have business experience and also because they felt biotech was high risk. They didn't understand the business. So I think overcoming those credibility challenges made me strong. And this is something I want to share with all the women in this room, that take on tough challenges, because when you overcome those tough challenges, you become really strong. And some of the learnings are that, look, you know, you are trying to, you know, build credibility, and that credibility has to be built on excellence and on competing with the best. So if you want to compete with the best, then you've got to focus on building that kind of business excellence in whatever you do. And I think that's what I really focused on as I built the company. And as I said, you know, I had to sort of, I mean, every entrepreneur actually has a sense of purpose. And my sense of purpose was about, you know, building a business initially which was about finding eco-friendly challenge, solutions for polluting industries. And so I was basically developing a large number of enzyme technologies to replace these polluting chemical technologies with. And I was trying to sort of green the world, so to speak. I think at that time I did pretty well, but then there came a point in time when I said, look, I want to go beyond what I'm doing right now. And that's where my interest in biopharmaceuticals became my raison d'etre, because I think secretly I was a failed doctor. I actually wanted to become a doctor after I graduated from school and college. I somehow never made it to medical college. And that gave me the opportunity to see how I could engage with the medical world. And I decided basically to transform my business from enzymes to biopharmaceuticals. And that actually gave me a very different perspective and a sense of purpose. And that sense of purpose was a humanitarian engagement where I wanted to develop, affordable biopharmaceuticals for the whole world. Because I realized that the whole pharmaceutical industry is very skewed towards affluence and towards, Western patients who can afford such drugs. Whereas I think 2/3 of the world is denied access to important life-saving drugs. And that became my raison d'etre. I said, I cannot live in a country like India and not address this huge global health challenge, which is really about providing affordable access to life-saving drugs. And therefore, I started by looking at some of the areas, diabetes, cancer, autoimmune and immunological disorders. And I found that in every one of them, biopharmaceuticals were life-saving in their very nature. And hardly 5% or 10% of the patients in the developing world could afford it. And these governments in the developing world also were not able to afford these drugs. And I realized that forget even the developing world, even in the many developed economies, I think many patients were denied drugs which they needed as life-saving drugs only because they were so expensive. So that became my raison d'etre, my sense of purpose, my driving sense of purpose. And today I'm pleased to say that, we pride ourselves that we are the lowest cost producers of insulin in the world. We are the lowest cost producers of life-saving monoclonal antibodies in the world. And, we are seeing the transformative change that we are bringing to many of these developing world regions, where patients can at last access these life-saving drugs which were otherwise denied to them. So I think, as Naina very kindly said that, okay, because I don't know whether it's just because I'm a woman that I feel that way, but I certainly believe that there are very few, business leaders in the pharmaceutical world that actually feel that way. There are a few. I mean, they're not all women. I mean, I would say that there are many other humanitarian business leaders in the pharmaceutical world who are men. But I do believe that being a woman does bring in that sense of, humanitarian engagement and that sense of purpose for sure. But I think as a business leader, as a business person, I think what I feel proud about is the fact that I head, the largest biopharmaceutical company in Asia. And that's something which basically has broken the gender barrier, so to speak. Secondly, of course, I'm also very pleased with the kind of impact we are making on global healthcare, and I will continue to do that because that certainly drives me to do more and more and more. But I think the thing I want to focus on is really about building business excellence as women. And I think you have many, many examples of building excellence in whatever they do. I mean, Nirupama is here as a great role model and as a great example of building excellence in the diplomatic world that she's just described to you. And then you've got Shaheen here, who also basically is doing her bit in building excellence in the kind of NGO work that she does. And I would like to do that, and I am doing the same in my own field, which is, the business world, and so on and so forth. And so I think women have to really be confident. You have to be driven by a sense of confidence. You have to believe, you have to be driven by a sense of self-belief. And of course, I think in these stories that you've read,
Shireen.
Here's another example of excellence who has just walked in, Shireen Bhan, who represents excellence in the media world. I think because she's a great role model for young women in what she does. So I think basically, I think you need to believe in yourself, and I think one of the things that's run as a common thread is that you need your own family who believe in you and support you. And I think all of us have been beneficiaries of that. And I think it's very interesting, we've all had father figures who've actually been, great, pillars of strength for us, and who actually propped us and, coaxed us and cajoled us and, motivated us to do even more than what we thought we could. So I think with that I'll end and say that, I must say, Naina is someone who has taken a deep interest in diversity issues and, the whole area of gender inclusion. And I think this book is a testimony of that. And I was also very proud when Naina became the first woman chair of FICCI. So I think that was great as well. Thanks.
Thank you.